Hey everybody, welcome to the Dreamer's Edge podcast. I am sitting with...
Eric, I'm a teacher, sometimes writer.
And Chris, sometimes writer and full-time editor.
Hi, I'm Francois. I'm a librarian. I read books, I watch movies, and for some reason I keep getting invited to these things.
Because we like you!
I like you too!
Alright, and I am Dimitri, and I respond when people fish for compliments. And today we are talking about globalization.
Okay, let me just throw it out there. Does Hollywood need America anymore? Spielberg is coming back to direct, and he's doing Tintin. But it's not getting released into the States. It's actually going to go overseas first. We're not going to get it in the domestic market until mid-December?
Mid-December, that's right. It's our Christmas release.
Which makes sense because it's a family movie. It's going to hit the four quadrants. You know, you're going to want to go with your grandparents, but it's still an interesting platform, and I just wanted to talk about it.
Alright, before we get to all of that, we're going to do something we like to call show and tell, and that's when we recommend a little something. And since we're talking about globalization, we're going to talk about things from the international market, some cool imports that you might want to check out. What did you get us started, Frank?
My choice is a French movie called Les Hussards sur les Toits. It stars Olivier Martinez and Juliette Binoche in one of her pre-Hollywood fame roles. Great love story, by all means. The only thing that's really annoying is that I'm afraid you're going to have to learn French if you don't already speak it, because the English cut, unfortunately, slices out about 40 minutes of the movie, completely gutting it.
Oh my god.
It's really unfortunate. The thing is that they've spliced it in a very interesting fashion. I own the French original copy, which is is a much longer movie, of course. I bought the English version on eBay, thinking I'll offer it to someone who doesn't necessarily speak French, and was shocked when those 40 minutes were cut out. We're talking about 40 continuous minutes here, not little cuts here and there. Anyways, it's a really interesting movie. It's based on a book that was a bestseller in France. It takes place during the mid-1800s, during a cholera epidemic in France, and it's about an Italian slash French gentleman fighting for Italian independence. At that point, that was a huge deal. So it has a very swashbuckling feel to it, but also a lot of romance. It's a great movie, absolutely. Highly recommend it.
All right, for me, I don't know. I was thinking the easy recommendation would probably be in anticipation of the Daniel Craig Christmas release to actually watch the European versions of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So if you haven't seen that, either read the book, watch the movie.
I have to interrupt you right there. Like in the Daniel Craig release, there are two actual release.
No.
Releases?
Sorry. The Daniel Craig release is the American version, but
okay.
there's the original Swedish version.
Known generally speaking as Millennium.
Yeah, it's the Millennium Trilogy. So there's 3 movies in it. So I'd say track that down if you want to watch it. But we're going to be talking about Tintin a little bit, which is part of the big bande dessinée tradition of Europe. So I'd say if you want to do something that is Europe's version of what they think an American action movie is, inspired by a European bande dessinée, so you get a little bit of meta here, watch Largo Winch.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
Absolutely.
Nice.
I thought you were going to go Dylan Dog. And...
yeah, Dylan Dog, Dead of Night. Yeah. I figure everyone's already watched it. Why recommend it?
My recommendation is just a little gem of a film that's called L'Homme sur le train, The Man on the Train. It's with Johnny Holiday, which is kind of like the French version of Elvis.
I've heard him once described as the most famous rock star you've never heard of.
Exactly. And actually, he's awesome in it. Just very low-key, and he kind of plays just somebody with a lot of swag. Anyway, just a beautiful film, like two people, like completely different in life. One is a French teacher, while the other one is just this guy that does heists. And they meet, and they kind of strike this weird friendship where both of them want to have each other's life. One wants more excitement, the other one wants just to be calm. And there's an odd friendship where both of them are kind of pushing each other, but there's really a kinship. And it's actually quite a quite a great film.
Yeah, it's a nice little movie. Like I think it was like 2003 or something.
Yeah,
like somewhere around there. But it's been a while. But it's a great movie.
All right, my recommendation. Frank, it's really funny that you talk about a movie that in its American release got chopped up quite a bit because I'm going in the same direction, albeit a little bit differently, because I'm going to recommend Profondo Rosso, the Dario Argento movie that essentially started the slasher, a giallo. And what's interesting about it is that for the longest time, when Deep Red was released in the United States, even though it was beloved, it's about half the movie that Profondo Rosso actually was. And recently they just released a DVD edition of it with the full movie, except that, only half of it is translated. They didn't redo any of the dubbing, so if you watch the full version of it, you'll get half of it in Italian and half of it in English.
Oh my God, what a weird...
Yeah, it's really weird. But it is interesting if you're interested in cinema and also in cultural differences, because you'll get to see what the American distributors felt was not fit for an American audience just as you watch the movie, which is a fascinating experience if you're into that sort of thing. So, little film school recommendation for you guys.
Yeah, it's a nice one. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, then, so let's get to the conversation proper. You mentioned that Tintin is getting released a full month and a half in the international market before it gets released here in America. North America.
Yeah.
North America. Yes, absolutely.
All right, so we're recording out of Quebec. Let's just put that down there. The bastion of French within North America. So we've all grown up with Tintin as a character. Frank, can you give us a bit of synopsis of the character for the people who might not know who he is?
Hergé, who is the author of the BD, basically is Belgian. Tintin is a Belgian character. He's a reporter. Tintin, as we call him over here. And he basically runs around the world having adventures, reporting, meeting various very colorful characters in Egypt, China, South America. He goes to the moon. He has a tremendous amounts of mind-boggling adventures, but it's very different from what American audiences...
He's a bit of a Jimmy Olsen character, minus Superman, and done in like a cartoony, photorealistic style.
Yeah.
I guess...
I don't know if I would call him Jimmy Olsen, because the distinction is that Jimmy Olsen messes up a lot, whereas
Right.
Tintin never does.
No, you're right. Okay. No. But he's kind of the young, keen guy going around and kind of gets him into places. You're not quite sure why he's got this access. It's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and it's worth noting.
Of his hair.
Right. It's worth noting that I could be wrong, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but Tintin is pretty much the model that sort of redefined the Franco-Belgian bande dessinée comic book and sort of brought it to the modern age and has been the template for over 60, 70 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. In Europe in general, and in France in particular, I guess French-speaking countries, in the francophonie across the world, everybody's familiar with it. I'll be quite honest, I was a little surprised when I first heard that Spielberg and Peter Jackson wanted to do Tintin, because it struck me as something that was very foreign
Well,
to Hollywood.
I heard Spielberg latched onto the idea before he'd even read it or understood it. He just liked the images.
Well, I heard that around Raiders of the Lost Ark, he was doing Raiders of the Lost Ark and he was introduced to it at the time. Mm-hmm. And he apparently just fell in love with it immediately.
Peter Jackson surprises me less. The thing to note about Tintin is that it is currently the second most translated Franco-Belgian comic book in the world. The first one being Asterix. Yeah. And before 1980 something, it was the number one most translated and most distributed around the world. And the thing about it is that it has broke almost every market internationally except the U.S.
Yeah.
U.S. has been completely resistant to it. Now, Peter Jackson coming from New Zealand, I'm not surprised that he might have fallen in love with it when he was a kid.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost got the same flair of, you mentioned Indiana Jones, so it's got that thrill of the serial. So it's right out of that kind of inspiration, probably for Peter Jackson. The same idea that the serial was for Spielberg. Back in the day, and so when I heard about this project together, I admit I was a little bit excited. Then I saw the trailers.
Yeah,
and I lost all interest, and then I don't know. Then now I wonder if this idea to release overseas first is really just a way to kind of delve into the market they know they've got to try and build up the interest that they might not have domestically.
I think that's precisely it.
Let's say it only makes 200 million domestically, because it's still going to make a killing compared to some movies. Will it be considered a failure?
Oh,
And that's what I'm wondering, because it's going to make probably $1 billion,
Well, you say the decision to release it internationally is almost, well, okay, we're doing this, but we're not sure it's going to succeed.
Well, I don't
domestically.
know if that's the case, because if we also look at November, I think we've got Happy Feet 2, Puss in Boots, we've got a lot of kids' movies that are coming out in November. So it would be competing against space for that domestically. And I think a lot of those things are going to get the audience first, because they're sequels, or spin-offs to franchises America knows.
Yeah.
Tintin, we don't even know how to pronounce.
Yeah, but it has that pedigree, though. If you look at the trailer, it doesn't show you anything of interest, but it shows you Peter Jackson, Simon Pegg, Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
But I think, it's funny. I keep looking at Tintin as a vanity project almost for Spielberg and Jackson. But at the same time, they're aware, of course, that, obviously they're men of means, and they can certainly pump a lot of money into the project. Peter Jackson has raved about the technology that they're going to be using. They're developing it for this movie. It's going to be incredible and this and that. But the fact that they're releasing it domestically, it really brings up the whole notion that Chris sort of suggests, which is, does Hollywood need America anymore, or is it moving into sort of a phase where, well, we're going to start doing projects that aren't necessarily relevant domestically, but we know we're going to make a killing internationally? And if so, is Hollywood really, representative? I mean, it's still very much representative of America, but now I think more and more they're becoming aware that there's another market out there.
Well, Chronicles of Narnia. Disney desperately tried to revive the C.S. Lewis Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe franchise. Well, they didn't try and revive it. They wanted to see it through.
Yeah, exactly.
And this was going to be the big 3D, epic of the whole series. And it did do well overseas.
Yes.
It didn't do well domestically, and they're not going to do another one. So that's my question earlier about why. You know what I mean? Like, because the logic of Tintin seems to think that they're moving away from it, but the logic of this seems to think that, no, if it doesn't do well in the States, it's still a failure.
Well, there's two things different here. The thing with Chronicles of Narnia to consider as well is that it wasn't the same studio. The first two Chronicles of Narnia were Disney, and then Warner Brothers bought it. Disney just gave up on it. It was even counting international money. It wasn't making the growth that they wanted out of it. And Warner Brothers just went like, all right, free money for us. We're just going to take it over.
That.
But smaller franchises, like if you think about Garfield, Garfield, A Tale of Two Kitties or something like that. Yeah, A Tale of Two Kitties was made entirely because the British audience loved Garfield, the first movie, whereas the American audience went like, bleh.
I did not know that.
But it's got Bill Murray.
Yeah. And they did the sequel out of it, and they are working towards a third one. So,
Really? I didn't know that. Okay.
You touched up on a point.
Yes.
Like, so you're saying that Narnia didn't do well internationally, or it did
No,
well
it did.
internationally?
It did well
It did.
internationally.
Because you see, like you bring up C.S. Lewis, and I'm thinking my understanding of the whole Chronicles of Narnia is that it has a fairly obvious religious message, which I would think would really work well in the States, as opposed to a place like Europe where they're a little bit more blasé about it, type of thing. But I guess it's the other way around. It didn't do well in the States, but it did well in internationally.
The States, the American audience responds well to literal interpretations of religion. Chronicles of Narnia is a little bit too symbolic for them to really register.
Okay. Because there's another sort of like religious theme, or I should say perhaps maybe atheist theme.
In Garfield?
No.
What does Odie mean?
The Golden Compass, has been basically, okay, they
Axed.
produced one. It's been axed, right?
Yeah.
They're not doing it.
But there's
How did
another
that
one.
one do internationally?
It did quite well.
Yeah, very well.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we're actually, wow, okay. This is an interesting paradox.
So have we turned the corner? I don't know. Like, the movie's not out yet.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering what they're gambling on.
Well, the thing with Tintin, I think it's more a case of them looking at something like Taken. Now Taken is a production from the Luc Besson company, Eurocorp, that came out in Europe like a full year before it came out in the United States.
So did The Debt.
So did The Dead. But Let's stick to Taken.
Actually, simply the usual suspect. I remember because I saw it in Paris before it was even here in North America.
The fact that I know that Luc Besson's a little funny. He's able to like cross over the Atlantic and pretty much have his kind of his own way. The problem is that he gave up on Gaumont, which means that they own the rights to the professional, which they're really planning a sequel on. I read this recently. I'm so annoyed. Apparently, he wants to do one. Everybody who's involved wants to do a sequel. I would love to see Natalie Portman revisit that role, but the rights are held by this French movie company, and they're hell bent on denying Luc Besson any hope of making that sequel. I cry sometimes at night.
Yeah, but that's because he took over their place as number one in all of Europe.
Pretty much. It's an interesting point. Certainly.
You were saying about Taken, though.
The difference with Taken with Usual Suspect or the Dead that came out this September is that it's really American. You know what I mean? Like it's a popcorn entertainment. It's high octane action, and it's just a big guttural, visceral thriller. It's tailor made for an American audience. But it came out a year before in Europe, got tremendous buzz, and when it came out in the US with just a few TV spots, no more than that, it still did gangbusters because of that buzz. And I'm thinking if that's not what they're looking at.
It came out in February, didn't it? Like, that's always the dumping ground of just like, we just need something.
Yeah.
That's when, things like the Green Hornet come out. But it's when things that they think they're going to maybe either do badly or, it's not as much of an investment, and that's when stuff like that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Not like Tintin right at Christmas.
That is true.
So that's why it seems different. It feels different.
It's a huge month, certainly.
But I am wondering if they're looking for that sort of buzz from the internet to let them know.
I think they want the long tail. I don't know. And are you excited then? Because obviously we can't predict what's going to happen. I think it's going to do well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I like the look of it, like the whole stop motion, but I'm curious. Are you excited though about having Steven Spielberg back?
On a personal level, I'm more invested in Tintin doing well just because I want to see the sequel that's going to be helmed by Guillermo del Toro. Mm-hmm. Now, a Tintin by Guillermo del Toro, that excites me a lot more than a Tintin by Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson, to be honest.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen unless it does well, so...
Guillermo del Toro seems to be perpetually attached to
other people's franchises.
Well, or I would say Peter Jackson. Like he was slated there to be part of The Hobbit for a while, but then he had to walk away because and now this. So it's kind of interesting. I wonder if Peter Jackson didn't have a meeting with him. It's like, yeah, I'm really sorry about The Hobbit. You want to do Tintin?
Yeah.
Oh no, he's an active producer actually. He's a very active producer on Tintin. He's one of the people who work towards getting the rights and all of that. He's just been waiting in the backgrounds because he's letting Spielberg and Peter Jackson have the first film.
I don't know how excited I am about that. Now that I'm thinking about it, like his vision is so slightly horrific or dark. I can't see him doing the levity of something like Tintin well. And I think if they go that route where they try and leech the humor or the lightness, the children's orientation of this out of it and turn it into something that they're trying to really reach like dramatic heights, I think they've completely misread the source material.
Well, I think you could pull off Temple of the Sun very well. A Flight 714 to Sydney would like, as a kid was one of the Tintin issues which really freaked me out. I would almost cast Fox Mulder, David Duchovny, just, like as a cameo for that one. Tintin's always been a little weird sometimes, but, you're right that, like, Del Toro's CV certainly implies, like,
I like him as a director, but he has been quite consistent in his tone of what he's been doing.
Very much
is
so,
what I have to say. So.
Yeah. Eric, are you going to like Tintin or not?
I do like Tintin.
You like it right now. Are you going to like it when you see the movie?
No.
You're not going to like
it?
it?
I saw the preview and I was horrified.
Why were you horrified?
Because this is something that I grew up with. And,
I watched Beowulf already.
No, but it just looked tacky. It looked kind of cheap, and not that the live action movie. It was like Tintin les Oranges Bleues was any better. It was horrible. It was such a horrible film.
It's interesting because he has orange hair and he has a peculiar hairstyle, which all of you will be very familiar with very soon. Anyways, I'm looking forward to seeing how it translates into CGI.
His haircut is going to be the new Justin Bieber haircut.
Is Selena Gomez going to fake date it?
It's possible.
But overall, like, Tintin's one movie. I mean, is it a viable model for Hollywood to start looking beyond its borders? You know, we always look at the domestic market, but there's a whole lot of people outside the United States.
But what's changed? There's always been a lot of people, but there haven't always been a lot of movie theaters. Is what it comes down to.
Really? Okay.
You know, well, come on. You know what I mean? Like, how many movie theaters were in Russia like 20 years ago?
Okay.
You know.
But Japan though is like, you know, they've got the
But
high-tech
that's all
stuff,
changing.
right?
You know what I mean? So now there's just as many theaters in these territories. So yeah, you can start making the money. But then you've got to put in the extra expense of the translation or the localization of all the advertisement, the dubbing or the localization, the translation of the material. You know, so
You also have to consider that they're competing with different markets that are not here. They have
Exactly.
Bollywood to compete with,
Yeah.
and they have the Hong Kong film market to compete with.
The local market is always something you have to keep in mind.
So, you know, we're talking about this as, you know, like, okay, do we need America? You know, what's the...
Well,
I
does
don't wanna-
Hollywood need America?
Does Hollywood need America? It's almost sounding like we're xenophobic. The reason I'm bringing it up is, are we going to be able to get better stories by going overseas? Because what have we had this year where it's just reboots, sequels, you know, everything? You know, like, are we going to be able to tap into a different story set by going overseas and going to a different audience who doesn't want to watch Dukes of Hazzard 3?
And my answer is probably not. I mean, like,
Yeah.
if you look at Hong Kong movies, for anyone who's, like, really into it, they're all the freaking same after a while. You know, John Woo came to the scene in the 90s, and then every bloody movie looked like a John Woo movie, except, you know, bad. And it's sort of the same thing that happens in Hollywood, of course. So it's the same thing. What's going to happen is that for a while we'll be excited because we'll get things that won't feel cliche, but afterwards it'll be like they're just different cliches.
Yeah.
You know, that when The Ring You in 1999 came out, like, and then how many movies in the last decade have we seen with a thinny female ghoul with long hair, you know?
I remember that when the Femme Nikita came out, there was actually a race in the Hong Kong filmmaking industry to make the first quote unquote Femme Nikita clone, and you know that became like sort of a really intense thing for a while. But I guess it's you know, if we buy into the whole metaphor of the Americans being sort of the modern day Romans, right? The Romans exported their culture, and they were very crass, and they were very sort of like materialistic, and they were all about, you know, like the bread and circuses. You've got that sort of feel, like that sort of snobby attitude towards Hollywood in the modern day age, right? You know, the Americans have sort of established themselves as a superpower, and they've exported their culture, and it's a really big product. In order for Hollywood to go overseas and do well, they're going to start to have to, I guess, you know, modify
The way
their
they
product,
tell stories.
the way they
There's
tell
going to
stories.
be some different story beats, and that will become interesting. Like maybe slower, like longer pauses, whatever. I don't know. Like just we get used to certain styles.
I like the analogy with Rome, but specifically because what Rome also did is that it adopted a lot of the cultures they dominated. And Hollywood does specifically that. And that's one thing that no other market really does. Because Hollywood, what they do is when they find somebody they like internationally, first they start by remaking his movies. Then they import them. And then they bring the guy over to make movies for them.
Yeah.
We already have
John Woo being a
access.
perfect example.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Hollywood already gives us access to these different beats by bringing these people over. Now, not entirely because the producers sort of impose their things on it, but it's not entirely true that all Hollywood does is export. They do modify and evolve, and that's, I think, why they've managed to stay on top for so long, you know?
Fewer people are going to movies for a longer time, but you know you're making more money right away in the first weekend. Movies don't last as long in the theaters. They're costing more to make. They're putting out less movies. Television is in the golden age. We don't talk about movies as a golden age at all. Domestically, we don't talk about movies. We talk about Mad Men. We talk about, you know, Game of Thrones. We talk about HBO. We talk about, you know, Walking Dead. It's not movies anymore. That's, you know, part of the cultural conversation, I find.
Is it? I mean, like, it's at the same time when the Avengers trailer came out, the internet was abuzz, and so were we about it, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, but that's only because that's a crafted launch that they've been doing for a couple of years. So I do think that's quite unique.
Okay.
And I don't know how many times we're going to see that type of investment where it's just like, how many movies is it going to be by the time the Avengers comes out? Like maybe like 5 movies?
Technically, like Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, Hulk, Captain America,
Thor.
So 5-movie build-up for this one movie.
You know, I don't...
Okay, well, let's take one with fewer movies to build up, but still a few. I mean, every time, Christopher Nolan so much as farts that
Right.
everybody is abuzz about The Dark Knight Rises, you know?
Is he British?
Let's look at the argument from another end, because let's start like Jackie Chan, who of course has his hand on the international market. Jackie Chan movies are exported all across Asia and or Europe, but can't quite seem to pierce North America. And so every year he does 2 movies, one from his home market that he knows he's going to make tons of money with and get lots of exposure with, and one in America just because he's trying to pierce that market that just won't budge. So, they're having the same problem on the other end,
Yeah. Actually, speaking of Jackie Chan, and completely unrelated because he's not Japanese, but like, you talk about these people like, oh, they're big in Japan, almost as like, it's an insult. When is it going to be that you can be big in Japan and still be respected?
Jackie Chan's like, he's paid as high as any Hollywood star, as any major Hollywood star. Bollywood is doing like gangbusters right now. Like, there are competing markets that are arising, and they haven't challenged Hollywood yet. They're still fairly dismissed, but at the same time, I guess Hollywood is maybe noticing.
Well, technically speaking, Bollywood makes more money than Hollywood.
Bollywood, yeah, that's the thing,
And
right?
they produce more movies.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
insane.
but they've got the population for it too.
Yeah, but they export them. It really is.
Yeah.
It goes all across Asia. Is the thing.
Yeah. Which is something that, typically North American populations aren't really familiar with. Like, I hate to say it, like, considering the size of the Bollywood market, I really feel that I should know more about it, but we don't, because we've got the big lighthouse on, in California,
Yeah.
and we're pretty much, hey, it's all about the Hollywood release. Yeah, I can even make Quebec analogies for it, like, it's amusing to me. I came across this one anecdote where, movie executives were calling up in Quebec because, this is more of an argument of the local market being sort of powerful, but, the Titanic was number 2 for a couple of weeks in Quebec because, they had a hockey movie on, Les Boys, which was like, more popular than Titanic. And a bunch of Hollywood executives were scratching their heads going, what? Like, I'm starting to wonder.
That's only because James Cameron's from Ontario.
Maybe. Yeah. We don't like James Cameron. It's, when's the last time he's been into Ontario? Aside from, like, having to film a movie.
Or accept some honorary doctorate, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think what's more significant in terms of the shift that you're talking about is the fact that when producers are asked, is there going to be a sequel, it's no longer like, oh, we didn't really make any money, I don't think that's really an option. It's like for Scream 4, when Bob Weinstein was asked about it, it's like, well, Scream 4 flopped, so is your plans for Scream 5 and 6 still really in action? And his answer was pretty much like, let's wait until the international numbers come out.
And now they're talking about it again.
Yeah.
It's weird because I'm pretty sure that there has been more than one movie that has flopped domestically and has done very, very well. So, internationally. So, are they going to start doing maybe, okay, well, this flopped, okay, we're going to do a second one, but we're just going to release it internationally? That would be interesting. A sequel, like, for a movie that flopped domestically but did very well internationally.
Well, that brings us back to Garfield, Tale of Two Kitties, doesn't it?
There we go.
What is it? It's Garfield Goes to England.
Well, that's a good example. It's a kid's thing. I'm sure parents are going to, you're still going to rent it, maybe throw it in. Would you do it as video on demand domestically and actually release it in the theaters overseas if that's where it did well? Would that ever be a model?
That would be an interesting model. Yeah.
It'll be interesting next couple of years.
I guess now is a good time to wrap up and move on to our usual concluding bit. Chris, Frank, Eric, and I had planned a little comedy bit here that went terribly wrong. So instead of making you listen to that, I figured I'd subject you instead to a deleted scene from a previous recording, which is to say another bit that didn't go terribly well. It's an Electric Boogaloo Factory that deals vaguely with globalization and international relationships. It'll probably feel a bit out of context, but anyway, for those of you unfamiliar with it, the Electric Boogaloo Factory is when we take a movie that doesn't deserve a sequel and try to come up with a sequel for it. Kazim and I decided to tackle the Rambo franchise. Enjoy! I view Rambo more as a series about international politics, so I was trying to find something international to do, I think. What's going on right now is mostly related to the Middle East, but Rambo 3 already did that.
Mm-hmm.
I would also pick up from Rambo Going Home. Mm-hmm. And then talking to his dad and everything, and his dad turns out to be like one of these ranting old men. You know?
I like that. They're always fun.
Yeah. And his old man tells him about the 2008 Chinese Olympics and rants about how the Chinese are going to take over the world because they made a cool opening show.
Darn those acrobats.
Yeah. That seems to be the American climate, isn't it? So Rambo goes to fix the problem, you know. He goes to China and he's like, you will not take over the USA with your great choreography and your colorful shows, you. And most Chinese people are like, dude, it's just a dance, what the hell?
Does he take on the Olympic gymnastic team?
Well, exactly. It was like, I must stop your invasion of the West heralded by, you know, your joyful Olympics and your overperforming gymnasts. And then at the end, after menacing them a couple of times, Rambo comes back to his senses and realizes that, it doesn't really make sense to call somebody a cheater by claiming that their gymnasts are younger and therefore lesser trained. And it might be more reflective of a slightly racist culture. Take that, USA as a whole.
Man, do they ever whine. Sorry, I do have a family in the States, but sometimes, especially when it comes to sports.
Yeah, I was actually chatting with somebody during the Olympics. They were from the US. Nice enough people, but
yeah.
they were ranting about how Chinese are all cheaters because their gymnasts are clearly 11 years old instead of 16. And it was kind of like, that doesn't really make sense because she's less trained, you know?
Exactly. It just shows that they train incredibly hard to be at the level that they are at the age of 11.
Like if they were 11, which it turns out they weren't. But
yeah, exactly. They were exactly the age they should have been. But it also says, like, well, what did you expect them to look like?
It's more than just the very concept of it that I find disturbing. It's kind of like they're cheating because clearly they're more talented than our 16-year-old at 11. It's like, you know, you're not doing your athletes a service by claiming that.
Well, that's exactly it.
And he went like, no, all Chinese are cheaters, and I hope that 11-year-old girl does a face plant and breaks her neck. And I was kind of
that is the most awful thing.
I know, and I was kind of like, okay, first you claim that she's 11 instead of 16, and then you hope she breaks her neck. Did I get that clear? You're hoping a young girl breaks her neck at the Olympics.
Especially since that might be someone's only child.
In China, yeah.
Exactly. I'm like,
Exactly,
their family has probably sacrificed everything, and they really do. When it comes to Chinese athletes, I don't think Americans always appreciate how much they have to sacrifice in order to pursue that path.
In fact, there might be a case to be made that their government asks them to sacrifice too much.
That's true. I do find it a little upsetting, the idea that some of these young people may only get to see their family once a year, if even that.
Yeah. Boy, did we get sidetracked.
Yeah, we totally did.
How
did this connect to Rambo?
That's Rambo in China, making a realization, because that's what Rambo does.
Yeah. Good on him.
Yeah.
Pat him on the back.